The autumn air was sharp with the smell of hay and lantern smoke. All of Whitlock County had gathered in the great wooden hall, its beams strung with garlands of dried corn and orange ribbons. Boots scuffed against the floorboards, fiddles sang, and laughter rose and fell like the rhythm of the harvest season. It was the one night of the year when rich and poor stood in the same light. The harvest dance was a place of music, promise, and unspoken judgment. Caleb Whitlock stood near the edge of the hall, tall and steady, his hat in his hands. Everyone knew who he was, the heir to the largest ranch in 3 counties. His father's cattle roamed the hills like moving clouds, and his family name was as heavy as iron. The daughters of ranchers and merchants waited, dresses crisp, smiles practiced. Mothers whispered behind fans, pointing him toward their girls. Everyone expected Caleb to choose one of them when the music slowed for the partners' dance. It was more than a step across the floor. It was a claim of future, of standing, of marriage to come. Yet Caleb's gaze was elsewhere. Near the back wall, where shadows hid the cracks in her dress, stood Lily. She kept her hands folded before her apron, her brown hair pulled back plain. She had no family, no dowry, no claim but the work she gave in the Whitlock stables. Most barely noticed her. Some pitied her. Others scorned her. She was the orphan who brushed down horses and carried water pails. She had never been asked to dance. The fiddles slowed and the crowd parted. This was the moment. Caleb's father, a hard man with a jaw set like stone, nodded at him. The message was clear. Choose wisely, choose well, choose from our kind. Caleb drew a breath that tasted of dust and expectation. He stepped forward, boots echoing on the wood. Eyes followed him as he crossed the hall. A hush fell, broken only by the scrape of the bow across strings. Mothers held their breath. Girls straightened their skirts. Caleb did not stop at the circle of fine dresses. He walked past them, each step heavier than the last. Whispers stirred. His father's brow darkened. At the back wall, Lily froze. She lowered her eyes, certain he had strayed too far, that he must be searching for someone behind her. But when she looked again, Caleb was there, standing before her. His voice was steady, though the hall rang with silence. Will you dance with me? The words landed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a cup. Lily blinked. She caught her breath. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not in public, not with respect. For a heartbeat she wanted to refuse, to flee into the safety of the stable shadows. But Caleb's hand was there, open and sure. With trembling fingers she placed hers in his. The music rose again, awkward at first, then stronger. They stepped onto the floor together. The dancers moved aside, stunned, uncertain whether to jeer or to watch. Caleb led with quiet strength, his movements guiding hers until she found her rhythm. For a moment the hall, the whispers, the weight of eyes all fell away. There was only the scrape of boots, the sweep of skirts, and the steady warmth of his hand. But not everyone was silent. Near the edge, laughter cut sharp as a knife. The Whitlock heir chooses the stable girl, someone sneered. Others joined in with mutters of shame and disbelief. Caleb's father's face turned red, his fists tight at his sides. Still, Caleb did not falter. He looked at Lily, not the crowd, his jaw set with a decision deeper than the dance. And in that instant, though the night was just beginning, the course of their lives bent into fire and trial. The harvest dance had marked them both, not with music, but with a choice that would test love, land, and loyalty. The music ended with a final sweep of the fiddle, and the hall erupted not in applause but in a storm of whispers. Some clapped half-heartedly, unsure whether to show support or disdain. Others crossed their arms, their faces pinched with disapproval. Caleb guided Lily to the side, his hand still holding hers. He did not release her, even as the crowd pressed in with stares sharp as nails. Lily's cheeks burned. She felt as though the wooden floor had opened beneath her feet. You shouldn't have, she whispered, her voice low enough for only him to hear. But Caleb's eyes did not waver. I meant it, he said, and I don't take it back. Across the hall his father strode forward. Elias Whitlock was a man carved from years of dust and labor, his shoulders broad, his voice carrying like thunder. He stopped before them, his glare fixed on his son. "Caleb," he said, slow and stern. "A Whitlock does not shame himself in front of the whole county. You'll set this right now." The room held its breath. Lily tried to step back, but Caleb tightened his hold, not roughly, but with quiet resolve. "I've made my choice," Caleb replied. His words were steady, though his chest rose and fell faster than his calm face betrayed. Elias's jaw clenched. "Then you'll answer for it." "At the ranch." He turned on his heel, the matter unfinished but far from forgotten. The crowd parted for him as he stormed out, boots striking hard against the boards. The whispers swelled again, louder now, bolder in his absence. "He's thrown away his inheritance. What's she done to catch him? A Whitlock heir tied to a stable orphan, scandalous." The words struck Lily like stones. She lowered her eyes, shame biting deep, wishing she could vanish into the earth. But Caleb's voice cut through. "Let them talk," he murmured. "They'll tire of it." Yet his own hand trembled slightly against hers, betraying what he would not say aloud, that the choice carried weight heavier than both of them knew. When the night ended, Caleb walked her back to the stables. The lanterns burned low, and the cool wind carried the scent of hay and horses. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crunch of gravel under their steps. Lily finally spoke. "You've set yourself against your family," she said. "For me, why?" Caleb paused. He leaned against the wooden fence, gazing into the dark fields where cattle lay like shadows. "Because I'm tired of living by everyone else's measure," he said. "Wealth, land, names. It all means nothing if I can't choose who I stand with. Tonight I chose." His words were plain, but their weight settled on Lily's heart like an anchor and a flame, both at once. She wanted to protest, to tell him he should think of his future, but the firmness in his tone silenced her. He meant what he said. Still, doubt gnawed at her. In the quiet, she whispered, "What if they never forgive you?" Caleb turned toward her, his eyes steady even in the lantern's dim light. "Then I'll learn to live without forgiveness. But not without you," her breath caught. She had no answer, not then. She only nodded faintly, retreating into the stable shadows where her cot waited. Alone, she lay awake long after, the sound of music still echoing in her ears. What had begun as a simple dance now loomed like a storm across the horizon, and far beyond the stables, Elias Whitlock sat in his study, firelight flickering against his lined face. His hands pressed hard against the arm of his chair. He had built an empire for his son, only to watch it risked in a single reckless choice. His voice rumbled in the empty room, a vow no one else heard. "If the boy will not obey, then he will not inherit." Morning broke soft and cold over the Whitlock ranch. The fields glistened with dew, and the lowing of cattle rolled across the valley like a steady drum. Lily rose early from her cot in the stable loft as she always did, though her mind was restless from the night before. She brushed down the horses, her hands moving on habit alone, though her thoughts tangled like briar. Each whispered word from the harvest dance still echoed in her ears. By the time she stepped outside, Caleb was waiting near the fence line, his sleeves rolled, his hat pulled low. He gave her a nod, quiet but warm, as if nothing had changed. "You'll ride with me today," he said. She hesitated. "The others will talk." "They already are," he answered simply. "Let them. You belong here as much as I do." And so she mounted a mare she had long cared for but never ridden beyond the pasture. Caleb led her across the fields, showing her the ranch from his eyes. The sweeping hills, the rivers cutting through dry grass, the pens where calves bawled for their mothers. Each stop was a piece of the life he carried on his shoulders, a world bigger than she had ever been invited to step into. Some of the ranch hands watched in silence as they passed. A few tipped their hats politely, though others turned away, muttering under their breath. One older hand, gray at the temples, offered Lily a kind smile. "You've got steady hands," he said when she helped guide a restless colt into the pen. "The horses take to you." It was a small thing, but it settled some of the trembling in her chest. As the day wore on, Lily's work changed. No longer only sweeping stalls and carrying buckets, she began learning the wider duties, checking the herd, mending fences, balancing in the saddle for hours under the sun. Caleb worked beside her, patient, steady, though he did not shield her from sweat or strain. She felt every muscle ache, but in that ache was a strange pride. For the first time, her hands built something beyond survival. At supper, she sat at the long table with the ranch hands, their rough voices filling the kitchen. Some ignored her, others watched her with suspicion, but a few offered bread and passing words. It did not yet belong, but it was more than she had ever known. When the meal ended, Caleb's younger cousin, sharp-eyed and smirking, leaned close enough for her to hear. "Don't get comfortable," he murmured. "A stable girl doesn't last long at a Whitlock table." His tone was cutting, meant to wound. Lily lowered her gaze, swallowing hard, but Caleb caught the look on her face. Outside, under the fading sky, he asked softly, "What did he say?" "Nothing that isn't true," she replied, her voice hushed. "You know I don't belong." Caleb turned toward her, the last light of day casting shadows across his face. "You belong where you're chosen," he said firmly, "and I chose you." Lily looked at him then, and for the first time she let herself believe he meant it. The thought warmed her, even as the world pressed cold against them, but beyond their quiet corner of hope, whispers grew louder across the county. Families who once welcomed Caleb now spoke of betrayal, of shame. The rival heir, Marcus Hale, smiled slyly in parlors and on porches, stirring the talk like embers into flame. And in the Whitlock household, Elias's resolve hardened further. His son had made a fool's choice, and the father would not allow it to ruin the name he had built. For Lily, the days ahead would test more than her endurance. They would test whether trust, still fragile, still forming, could survive the storm now gathering over the ranch. The following weeks brought a shift in the air. Where once people greeted Caleb with easy smiles, now there were measured nods, narrowed glances, or none at all. In town, whispers followed him down the street. When Lily walked beside him, her apron plain, her boots worn, those whispers sharpened. Merchants paused in their counting. Women drew their daughters close. It was not only strangers. The Whitlock household itself grew colder. Caleb's younger cousins, who had once teased him with affection, now muttered insults sharp enough for Lily to hear. At meals, silence stretched where laughter once lived, and at the head of the table Elias Whitlock sat like stone, speaking only of cattle prices and land contracts, as though his son's choice were not sitting in the room before him. One evening, after supper, Elias at last spoke what he had held in. His words were measured but heavy as iron. A Whitlock heir must marry well. Land must bind to land. A woman with no name, no dowry, no kin, she offers nothing but ruin. End this before it goes further. Caleb met his father's stare across the long table. His jaw worked, but his voice was calm. "I will not." The silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Elias rose, his chair scraping hard against the wood. "Then you will learn, boy," he said. "You cannot build a future on shame." He left the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall like hammer strikes. Lily sat stiff, her hands folded tight in her lap. She wanted to speak, to tell Caleb he needn't fight for her, but the words caught in her throat. She feared that if she spoke, she might agree with his father, and that thought cut deeper than silence. Outside, the ranch hands gathered by lantern light, and the talk grew crueler. Marcus Hale, heir to the neighboring ranch, had taken notice. He spread whispers with practiced ease, that Lily was too close to the horses, that she stole small things from the barn, that she had no place among them. Each lie found eager ears, feeding envy and fear. One afternoon, Lily went to fetch water from the well. Two ranch wives stood nearby, their voices hushed but not hushed enough. "She'll drag the Whitlocks down," one said. "Mark me, it'll end in ruin." "The boy's bewitched." Lily's hand trembled as she drew the bucket. She carried it back without a word. though each step felt heavier than the last. That evening, Caleb found her brushing down a mare, her strokes rough with anger she could not hide. "What did they say?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." But he took the brush from her hand and set it aside. "It matters to me." Her eyes met his, bright with unshed tears. "They're right. I don't belong here. Your father knows it. The town knows it. You'll lose everything, Caleb. All for someone who has nothing to give back." He stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "You give me more than land or cattle ever could. You give me truth. And I will not trade that for approval." She looked away, unable to hold the weight of his words, yet inside her a seed of strength began to grow. Still, outside their fragile circle, the storm gathered strength. Marcus Hale's whispers became plans. He would not let the Whitlock heir's scandal pass without gain. If Caleb's choice weakened the family, Marcus would be ready to strike, through rumor, through sabotage, through whatever means the land demanded. The harvest dance had lit a fire, but it was the growing scorn of neighbors and kin that now fanned it into flames, and Lily, caught between loyalty and fear, felt the heat rising closer each day. Sunday morning came with clear skies, the kind that left no excuse to stay away from church. Families from across the county arrived in wagons and on horseback, filling the white clapboard building until every pew creaked under the weight of neighbors. Men removed their hats. Women adjusted bonnets. Children fidgeted in the stillness. Caleb walked in beside Lily. The sound of boots against the wooden floor seemed louder than the hymns. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. Murmurs flickered like sparks in dry grass. No one had forgotten the harvest dance. If anything, the weeks since had deepened the sting. Lily kept her gaze low, clutching the worn Bible the preacher had once given her. Each step down the aisle felt endless. She thought of turning back, of fleeing to the stables where whispers could not follow. But Caleb's hand was steady at her side. They took a seat near the front. Across the aisle, Marcus Hale smirked openly, his arm resting over the pew as if he owned the place. When Caleb's eyes met his, the smirk widened. The service began, the preacher's voice rising over the congregation. Words of grace and steadfastness filled the room, but for Lily they seemed far away. All she could feel was the eyes pressing against her back, the weight of unspoken judgment. When the final hymn ended, the congregation rose. That was when Marcus stepped forward, his tone loud enough to carry. "Strange days," he said, voice dripping with false concern. "A Whitlock choosing from the stables. Tell us, Caleb. How long before she ruins you?" Gasps rose from the crowd. The preacher tried to hush him, but the words had already sunk their barbs. All eyes were fixed on Caleb. For a heartbeat, Lily prayed he would ignore it, that they could walk out in silence. But Caleb did not stay silent. He stepped forward, his hand finding Lily's. In full view of the town, he lifted her hand into the light. His voice carried strong and clear. "This is the woman I choose. Not in secret, not in shame. She is mine and I am hers. Let every man and woman here know it." The room erupted. Some gasped in shock, others muttered angrily. A few, scattered and quiet, nodded with respect. Marcus's smirk faltered, replaced by a scowl. Lily's cheeks burned, her breath unsteady, but she could not pull away. Caleb's grip was firm, his resolve unshaken. She felt the tremor of fear beneath his steadiness, but he stood tall all the same. Elias Whitlock, seated at the back, rose with thunder on his face. His voice cut through the noise. "You shame this family before God and neighbor." His hand pointed like a command. "If you will not let her go, then you will let this ranch go. My word is final." The crowd stilled, waiting. Caleb's shoulders tensed, but his answer was unflinching. "Then so be it. My choice is made." Silence followed, heavier than any hymn. For the first time, Lily lifted her eyes to the congregation. Some looked away, unwilling to meet her gaze. Others stared openly, their judgment sharp. But in the midst of it all, she felt a strange calm. He had spoken not with shame, but with pride. And though fear coiled in her stomach, hope burned brighter than before. Outside, as the crowd spilled into the sunlight, the air buzzed with talk. Marcus slipped through knots of neighbors, his words dripping like oil. The Whitlocks are breaking. Their heirs lost his mind. A ranch like that needs stronger hands. Each whisper planted deeper suspicion, and in the shadows of wagons and trees, plans of sabotage began to take shape. The church bells had rung that morning as they always did. But by the time the sun set, the sound had come to mark something else entirely. The line between old loyalties and new defiance. The days after the church gathering grew tense like a drawn bowstring. Caleb still worked the ranch with steady hands, but every ride into town brought sharper looks, colder greetings. Lily kept to her chores, her back straight, her words few. Yet even silence could not shield her from suspicion. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the alarm rose. Smoke curled black against the orange sky. Shouts tore through the ranch yard. Fire! The barns burning. Men rushed with buckets, boots pounding the earth. Caleb was among the first to reach the flames. Heat roared from the wooden walls, horses screaming inside. He and the ranch hands tore open the doors, smoke choking their lungs as they led panicked animals into the night. Sparks leaped high, lighting the darkening sky. Lily threw herself into the chaos, pulling ropes, guiding frightened foals, coughing against the smoke that clung to her hair and skin. By the time the fire was beaten back, the barn stood blackened, a skeleton of beams. The horses were safe, but the loss was heavy. Silence hung over the men, broken only by the crackle of cooling embers. Then a voice cut through. Marcus Hale, standing at the edge of the crowd, his tone sharp as a knife. Strange, isn't it? The fire starts after a stable girl moves into the house, almost as if trouble follows her. Murmurs spread like wind over dry grass. One of the younger hands frowned. She was the last one seen near the barn earlier. Filling water buckets, wasn't she? I was, Lily admitted, her voice hoarse from smoke. But Convenient, Marcus interrupted, lips curling. A girl with nothing to lose, nothing to tie her here. What better way to secure her place than to set fire and play the hero? The crowd shifted uneasily. Suspicion gleamed in their eyes. Caleb stepped forward, anger burning hotter than the dying flames. Enough, he snapped. Lily risked her life to save those horses. You saw it, but Marcus only shrugged. Doesn't erase what came before. Fires don't start themselves. Caleb's father, Elias, stood silent, his face carved in hard lines. At last he spoke, his voice low and grave. Whether she said it or not, her presence brings ruin. The ranch suffers for this choice, Caleb, I warned you. The words cut deeper than the smoke. Lily lowered her head, shame pressing on her chest like stone. She wanted to protest, to plead, but her throat was dry, her courage worn thin. Later, when the crowd dispersed, Caleb found her sitting on the fence rail, her dress singed, her hands blistered. She would not look at him. They think I did it, she whispered. And maybe it doesn't matter if I didn't. To them I already carry the blame. Caleb's voice was steady, though weariness tugged at its edges. I know the truth, and that's enough. Her eyes filled, but she shook her head. It's not enough. Not for your father. Not for the town. Every day I stay, you lose more. He placed a hand over hers, rough from work, warm despite the night chill. Then let me lose it. Land and wealth name, I can fight for those, but if I lose you, there's nothing left worth keeping. The fire had burned itself out, but its embers smoldered in the hearts of men. Rumors spread by morning, carried by wagons and market stalls. Lily was marked by suspicion, and Caleb's defiance marked him as reckless. Marcus Hale's smile widened in the shadows. The fire was only the beginning. The fire's smoke faded from the sky, but its shadow lingered over the ranch. Days passed, and though the work continued, nothing felt the same. The hands spoke in low voices when Caleb was near. The town grew colder still. Merchants refused fair prices. Neighbors who once shook hands turned their backs. Elias Whitlock's patience broke at last. He called his son into the study, the heavy oak desk between them like a wall. The lamplight flickered across his stern face. I built this ranch for you, he said. Every acre, every head of cattle, every drop of sweat. And you throw it all away for her. Caleb stood tall, though weariness pulled at his shoulders. It isn't for her. It's for me. For once I choose a life that's mine. Elias slammed his palm against the desk. Then you choose without this ranch. You'll not inherit one fence post, not one herd. I'll leave it to your cousins, to anyone who understands loyalty to family. The words cut deep, but Caleb did not waver. If land means bowing to men who despise her, then I don't want it. Elias's face hardened. So be it, you're no heir of mine. Outside the door, Lily had heard every word. Her heart ached as if torn in two. When Caleb emerged, his face shadowed, she whispered, "You can't lose everything for me." "I already said it," he replied. "I'd lose the world before I lose you." But Lily's chest tightened with guilt. That night, as Caleb slept, she sat awake in silence. She thought of the barn fire, the whispers, the stares that carved her down. She thought of Elias's vow, the land Caleb was born to tend. And she thought of herself, an orphan girl with nothing but borrowed clothes and weary hands. Before dawn, she packed what little she owned. She pressed a folded note against Caleb's bedside table, her tears blotting the ink. Then she slipped from the house and back toward the stables, past the fences, into the fields where the grass bent in the wind. When Caleb woke, the note was the first thing he saw. Her words were simple, her handwriting unsteady. "I can't let you lose your family for me. You were born to this land. It's not mine to take. Forgive me, forget me." Lilia's heart clenched. He rushed to the yard, calling her name, but the only answer was the wind sweeping across empty fields. The ranch hands watched silently as he saddled his horse, their faces unreadable. Some pitied him, others smirked at his loss. Marcus Hale, hearing the news in town, allowed himself a slow, satisfied grin. The Whitlock heir had been broken by the very girl he had tried to raise. Back at the ranch, Elias stood tall, convinced the storm had passed. "She's gone," he told his son. "You'll see in time it was for the best." But Caleb's eyes were hard with resolve. "No," he said, his voice low, steady. "This isn't the end. I'll find her. And when I do, I'll stand with her, even if it means standing with nothing else." Yet for the first time, doubt gnawed at him. The land, the inheritance, the family name already slipping away. And Lily, the one person who gave it all meaning, was gone. The fire had not destroyed the ranch, but it had burned away the fragile peace that held them together. Caleb searched for Lily from dawn until nightfall. He rode across pastures down to the river banks, even as far as the old rail tracks where drifters sometimes passed. Each place gave him nothing but silence. The hills echoed with his calls, but her name was swallowed by the wind. By the second day, his father cornered him in the yard. Elias stood tall, his coat buttoned, his voice sharp. "You've proven your point, son. She's gone, let it be. Return to your duties. The ranch is waiting." But Caleb shook his head. "She isn't gone." "Not to me." Elias's jaw tightened. "You would throw away all that's been built here for what? For a girl who left you in the night." "She left to save me," Caleb answered, his tone steady. "And that's why I won't stop until I bring her back." Elias's face hardened, his patience snapping. "Then hear this, Caleb. If you go after her, if you choose her over this ranch, you choose exile. You will not inherit this land. You will not bear the Whitlock name with honor. You will be nothing but another hand with a horse." The word stung, but Caleb did not falter. He looked at the land around him, the fences, the fields, the cattle grazing in the distance. All of it was a legacy carved from his father's sweat. Yet none of it mattered if it meant denying the truth of his heart. He placed his hat on his head, his voice quiet, but resolute. "Then let it be so. I'd rather ride poor with her than rich without her." With that, he turned his back on the house that had raised him and mounted his horse. The ranch hands watched, some in silence, some with murmurs of disbelief. Marcus Hale's men, catching sight of him leaving, whispered eagerly. A Whitlock heir walking away from his inheritance was the very scandal they had hoped for. Caleb rode hard toward the hills where he guessed Lily might wander. She had no kin, no ties but the horses she loved. He searched the smaller ranches, The old logging road, even the abandoned cabins where travelers once found shelter. Each night he lit a small fire under the stars, staring into the flames with thoughts heavy as stone. "Where are you, Lily?" he whispered. Meanwhile, Lily herself had taken refuge near the ridge in a small cabin used by shepherds. She tended a wounded foal she had found limping near the fence line, her hand steady even as her heart wavered. She tried to tell herself she had done the right thing. Caleb was free now, his inheritance safe, but each night the silence pressed in, and the thought of his steady voice, his unwavering hand, haunted her more than the darkness around her. By the third night, Caleb found the foal's tracks in the dust and followed them to the ridge. The sight of her at the cabin door nearly stole his breath. She looked worn, her dress smudged, her face pale with exhaustion, but she was there, alive, strong, still herself. Lily froze when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling. "Go back before your father disowns you completely." Caleb dismounted, his boots steady against the earth. "I already chosen," he told her. "I chose you, and I'll keep choosing you, even if I ride away with nothing but the horse under me." Her eyes filled, torn between fear and hope. For the first time since leaving, she let herself believe he would not bend, would not be broken by threats of land or legacy. And in that belief, something within her broke open too, not in despair, but in surrender to the truth she had tried so hard to deny. The world behind them was set against them, but before them lay a path carved not by inheritance or law but by choice, and Caleb had chosen her once and for all. Caleb and Lily returned to the ranch together at dawn. The valley was still, the cattle grazing in silence, the charred barn a black reminder of all that had been lost. Some hands looked on in quiet surprise as the pair rode side by side. Others muttered under their breath, shaking their heads. Elias Whitlock stood on the porch, his face grim as carved stone. "So you return," he said, his voice flat. "Didn't my word mean anything?" Caleb dismounted and helped Lily down. His voice was calm but unyielding. "I told you. My choice is made. I'll stand with her." Before Elias could answer, a commotion rose at the far fence line. 2 ranch hands came running, shouting that a small herd of cattle had gone missing overnight. Panic rippled through the yard. Losing animals meant losing money, losing standing, another blow to a name already shaken. Almost at once, eyes turned toward Lily. A hand pointed. "It started after she came," the man growled. "First the fire, now the cattle." Murmurs swelled, suspicion growing like smoke. Lily's breath caught, her face pale. But Caleb stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "She has nothing to do with this." Before more could be said, an older hand who had ridden out early came galloping back into the yard. His horse was lathered with sweat, his voice urgent. "The tracks don't head west with the herd like usual," he shouted. "They're driven south toward Hale land." A hush fell. The name hung heavy in the air. Marcus Hale. Caleb's jaw set. "I'll see to it myself." He and several hands rode hard, following the trail of hoofprints. The sun beat down as they pushed south, dust rising with every mile. At last they reached a dry gulch where cattle were penned with makeshift barriers, and there, overseeing it with a smug grin, stood Marcus Hale. "Well, look here," Marcus drawled as Caleb rode up. "Seems your cattle wandered off. Fortunate they found their way into my care." "You drove them here," Caleb snapped. "You set the fire too. You've been spreading lies to turn the town against us." Marcus laughed low and mocking. "And who'll believe you? A Whitlock heir who threw his name away for a stable girl. You're already ruined. When your father disowns you, this land will need new hands, and I'll be ready." But before Caleb could answer, the older ranch hand who had tracked the herd rode forward, pointing toward Marcus's men. "I saw them driving the cattle," he said firmly. "And I saw the oil tins in their wagon, the same kind that set a barn to blaze." The men shifted uneasily. Whispers rose, anger stirring now not against Lily but against Marcus. His smirk faltered. Caleb dismounted, stepping closer, his voice ringing clear. "You'd ruin a family and burn good land for greed. That's no heir, Marcus. That's a coward." The ranch hands, Whitlock and otherwise, began pulling the barriers aside, driving the cattle back toward home. Marcus shouted after them, but his words carried no weight now. His lies had been laid bare in the sun. By the time Caleb returned to the ranch with the herd, the truth had already spread. The hands looked at Lily with new eyes, not yet fully trusting, but no longer condemning. Elias stood on the porch, silent, his face unreadable. Caleb took Lily's hand in front of them all. "This is the woman I'll build with," he said, voice strong. "With land or without it, her place is here." The crowd stilled, the air thick with unspoken change. For the first time, no one whispered against them, and though Elias's silence held its own storm, the tide of scorn had broken. The rival had been exposed. The lies are undone, and what remained was the truth, standing firm in the open light. The valley shifted with the season. Autumn rolled in, painting the hills gold and rust. The air turned crisp, carrying the scent of hay and wood smoke. The scars of fire and betrayal still marked the land, but in their place something new had begun to grow. Quiet trust, slow but steady. On a clear morning, beneath a grove of tall oaks, Caleb and Lily stood side by side. The trees arched above them like a cathedral, leaves drifting down in shades of copper and crimson. It wasn't a grand church wedding, nor the kind Elias once imagined for his heir. But it was honest, and it was theirs. A small gathering had come. Ranch hands who had once doubted now stood in clean shirts and brushed hats. Neighbors who had gossiped now brought pies and loaves, setting them on long tables. Even children darted about, laughing as they scattered petals. The town that had nearly turned against them now came to witness something stronger than rumor, choice made into covenant. Lily wore a simple dress, white but plain, the hem brushed against the grass. Her hair was pulled back with a ribbon, nothing more. Yet in Caleb's eyes she was brighter than any jewel, steadier than any stone. The preacher spoke in a low voice words about faith, endurance, and love that hold through fire. Caleb listened, but his gaze never left Lily's face. When the vows came, his voice did not waver. "I choose you," he said, plain and sure, as though speaking the truth of the earth itself. Lily's hand trembled as she answered, but her words were clear. "I choose you," the preacher smiled. "Then what God has joined, let no man put asunder." The hands clapped. Some whistled. The children cheered, and Caleb leaned down, pressing his forehead to Lily's in a moment that spoke louder than any kiss. The vow was sealed, not just by words, but by the weight of everything they had endured to reach this day. Elias Whitlock stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, his face still stern. He had not spoken since the truth of Marcus Hale came to light. But as the gathering celebrated, his gaze softened just slightly. For all his pride and fury, he could not deny what stood before him. His son unbroken, his choice unshaken. The woman beside him neither weak nor shameful, but strong enough to weather fire and slander. When Caleb and Lily turned to leave, Elias called his son's name. Caleb paused, bracing for one final rejection. But Elias only nodded once, slow and heavy, like a man laying down a burden. "Take care of this land," he said. It was not an apology, nor a full acceptance, but it was a beginning. That evening, under lanterns strung between the trees, the new couple shared their first meal as husband and wife. Laughter rose, songs carried across the valley, and for the first time in many months, hope hummed in the air. Later, as the crowd thinned and stars filled the sky, Caleb and Lily walked to the pasture fence. Horses grazed in the dark, their breath clouding the air. Lily leaned against the wood, her head resting on Caleb's shoulder. "This was never the life I dreamed," she whispered. Caleb smiled faintly. "Nor I, it's better." In the stillness, surrounded by land scarred yet alive, they stood together. What had begun as a scandal at a harvest dance had grown into something no whisper could undo. A home, a family, a love chosen, not given by birthright but forged by trial and fire. And under the autumn sky, with nothing but the sound of wind through the oaks, Caleb and Lily's story was no longer a question of worth. It was a promise, kept and enduring. If you enjoyed this story of love, loyalty, and second chances, don't forget to like this video. It helps more people discover these tales. Subscribe for more love and drama stories from the ranchlands, and share this with someone who loves a good romance with heart. Thank you for listening.